ahead and get us started. Thank you so much for being here and for joining today's session. Today is taking action for yourself, creating lasting change for your mental health. My name is Jackie Zimmerman. I am the manager of public education partnerships and e-learning at MHA's national office, and I'll just be here to help moderate today's session. I am joined by three incredible individuals who will really take the lead on diving into today's topic. But before we do that, I have just a few notes for you all. This webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to all registrants within 1 week. We currently do not offer CEUs, but I can provide you with a certificate of attendance. So if you would like a certificate, I have a form that you can fill out. I'll be putting that in the chat in a little bit, and that will also be included in your follow-up email. So if you don't get it out of the chat, that's okay. You'll get it afterwards from us. We also might have some time at the end of today for some Q&A. So as our speakers are going, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'll be pulling those questions, so if we do have time at the end, we can go through a few of them with you. And as always, feel free to use the chat as a space to make comments, ask questions, share resources in a respectful way. So thank you for your engagement in the chat. We also want to give a huge thank you to Ensora Health for sponsoring today's session. Ensora Health is streamlining practice management for over 200,000 therapists nationwide. It's helping free them of administrative burdens so they can really focus on that exceptional patient care. If you want to learn more about Ensora, I'm going to put a link in the chat right now. And all of these links will be included in your follow-up materials. So again, if you don't get it out of the chat, that's okay. I also want to highlight that Ensora has an amazing therapist survival kit. I know a lot of people that join our sessions are working in this space or know someone who might be. This kit helps discover therapist-approved strategies to simplify your day, find balance, and kind of renew that passion you have for helping others. So I'm going to put that link in as well right now. Like I said, these will be coming in your follow-up. And I just want to say again, welcome for Mental Health Month. It is May. We are so excited at MHA. It's a big thing for us. It's the time where we really get to celebrate awareness and give everyone some really actionable tools. This year, it's that turn awareness into action, action for yourself, things that you can do for your own mental health, and action you can take to help support the mental health of others. We have action guides and tons of resources on our website. I'll post that link in the chat too, and it'll come in follow-up. But today, we're really here to focus on things that you can do for yourself. And I'm joined by three wonderful speakers that are going to give us some tips and insight and tools on how to do that. But first, I'd just love to introduce them. With us, we have Isra Nathir, who is a New York City-based psychotherapist, writer, and founder of Well Guide, a digital community for mental health awareness. A Pakistani Canadian, child of immigrants, she has a specific focus on mental health, identity formation, and healing for the AAPI first and second generation immigrant community. Isra has been featured in Harvard Business Review, Time, NBC, Vox, HuffPost, Teen Vogue, Vogue India, and other major publications. She has also been able to speak at corporations and institutions such as Google, Meta, Pepsi, Ernst & Young, Columbia University, and Yale University. And recently published her first book, Toxic Productivity, which I absolutely love and our staff love. She currently lives, loves, and works in New York. Welcome, Isra. We also with us have Megan Watson, who's a registered psychotherapist and founder of Bloom Psychology and Wellness, a Toronto-based collective of Black, Indigenous, South Asian, and multiracial therapists providing identity-affirming care. With over a decade of experience supporting individuals, couples, and organizations, Megan's work centers emotional wellness, relational healing, and sustainable mental health practices. She holds a master's degree in mental health counseling and behavioral medicine from Boston University School of Medicine and has specialized training in eating disorders, substance use, complex trauma, and 2SLG. Megan serves on the advisory boards for the National Eating Disorder Information Center and the Scattered Joy Project. She also works as a writer, consultant, and speaker, creating thoughtful, action-oriented mental health resources. Megan, we are so happy to have you join us today. Welcome. And last, we have Tyler Key, who is a licensed mental health counselor that currently practices as a remote clinical counselor for the Navy. He provides short-term solution-focused individual and coupled counseling to active duty service members and their dependents. He has previously provided clinical services on site at the Naval Station Mayport in Florida, in addition to providing case management service to the Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton in California. Tyler's professional history expands across various clinical sectors, including long-term private practice for adults, community-based services for children, and intensive in-home services with families. His primary theoretical orientation is cognitive behavioral therapy, but he's received training in functional family therapy, dialectical behavioral therapy, and trauma-focused CBT, and ecosystem structural family therapy. Welcome, Tyler. As everyone can see, and I saw the clapping and the celebrating, we have just an incredible panel here today. Some really talented individuals who are doing such important work in our community. So thank you for being here. I know we have a lot to chat about, so we can jump right into discussion. But really, the kind of core of why MHA really wanted this Turn Awareness into Action for Mental Health Month is that we're starting to get the message out about mental health, right? People are feeling a little more comfortable now talking about it in certain spaces and saying, you know, yeah, maybe it's something I need help with, or knowing that it's something that, you know, is important, but really being able to take that next step beyond just knowing and taking that step into healing is so important. Healing for yourself, helping others heal. And I think sometimes when we think about caring for ourselves or trying to improve mental health, we think of big, drastic changes that we have to make. And that can be hard and sometimes not quite as sustainable. So when thinking about caring for mental health, how can those smaller, consistent changes make a difference for long-term recovery? And anyone who wants to.
Yeah, I'll kick us off. This one is really close to my heart because that's really where we build so much self-confidence and even just the ability to believe that we can achieve the goals that we're setting. So essentially what happens sometimes is we might have like a really big goal and it requires this big change and you try to shift things around, you do it, and then it doesn't last very long. You're not able to sustain big changes for very long. And a lot of times, even for me, I'll be like, damn, like, I just don't know how to do this. This is just not for me. This is too hard. And it creates this self-narrative of, not having a lot of what's known in therapy self-efficacy, which is the belief in your own abilities. So by selecting the small change, it has this compounding effect on your own confidence and your own ability to believe that you can make these changes because it is more accessible, right? I mean, I'll just quickly share my example. Working out is very challenging for me. I know that it's really important because for health reasons, but it's just something that I didn't grow up with. So it's very, very hard for me. And right off the bat, try to do strength training 60 minutes, 4 times a week for many, many attempts was really impossible for me. I would start and then it wouldn't happen. So I shifted to 20 minutes once a week first, right? Just 20 minutes once a week. And then I incrementally changed that habit to make it bigger and longer to where I am right now. So I think that's why small habits are easier because they have this compounding effect.
Totally agree with you on that. I love what you mentioned about cultivating internal trust. I think that's something that I hear a lot of my clients really struggle with is they want to be able to do the big goals. They want to be able to achieve incredible things with their lives. They don't want to settle for less than the precise target, right? But there's a difference between precision and perfectionism. And then there's a difference between for me, I separated into 3 main categories. We have systems, right? So it's our processes, it's our ways of doing things. the routines create predictability and repetition that can sometimes help us follow through with the changes that we want to make. But then the last part that I think really needs nurturing for some is this ritual, right? A ritual is a return to self for me. They aren't like a routine, which can sometimes reduce decision fatigue. It's like, okay, I know what my routine is. I don't have to think too far in advance to make the change happen. But a ritual, it's a small but a really, really tiny, powerful way to offer rhythm. And big transformation, in my opinion, comes from these ordinary, repeated acts of care, whether that is attending to your system, like what processes do I have in place to make my life feel more meaningful and more effective, right? To the routines, the repetition, the consistencies that I want to show up in, and then also like the rituals, like how am I nurturing myself? How do I make the process of all of this feel more like me? I have a lot of my clients who are really good at routines. They're really good at systems, but they're not great at ritual. And because routines and systems are not fulfilling personally, they don't always have a sense of depth, a curation to you as a person. There is a loss of motivation that comes when you're on a road to making a big transformation, whether that is you want to be more consistent with a work project, you want to work out more. I also have a lot of trouble with that. Or even just something internal, like maybe you're working on something with your therapist or a coach, and you're trying to get better at something in some way. I think the ritual cultivation can really offer the nurturance and the fulfillment that some people are really missing in order to feel trusting in themselves to get those goals set. Yeah, that's kind of the way that I could describe it to my clients, and afterwards they're like, okay, I need to touch.
No, and I couldn't agree with both of you more, especially when it comes to just starting somewhere, right? Like all change has to start somewhere, and sometimes there can be that hesitance of like, where do I begin? Or our clients will often come in with sort of these big goals of what they want to accomplish, and it's our job as clinicians to help them to break it down into those smaller, manageable components. I know for me, especially working with the military, like we're only allotted a certain time frame with our clients. So I only see my clients on general about 12 sessions. So I love having the general goal with those clients, but we break it down into SMART goals as far as the objectives. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time sensitive. Sort of, I'll stick with a workout example that both of you touched on. Sometimes, like if we haven't been working out in months, we might have that general goal of like, I want to work out, I want to get healthier, but we have no idea where to start. And sometimes it's like a haircut. If you don't know how much you want to do, start small. You can always cut off a little bit more. You do too much, it might take time to recover from it, right? So if we start in those small steps, like even if it's, I think I saw somebody in the chat, like walking 5 minutes a day, that's a great place to start. And then we can always build from there. And these small scale changes tend to have snowball effects, right? Like as we build, it becomes easier, we feel more empowered, and then that short-term change can segue into more long-term change.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for those really great and kind of specific examples. I think a lot of times for someone who is struggling with their mental health, maybe they're experiencing anxiety, depression, other type of mental health conditions, the easy kind of things is I need to see someone, I need to get into therapy. Those can be big steps. And for some people, they're not able to do that right away, or it's not available to them. What are some of those smaller steps that people could take today, this week, this month, to start to get to those larger changes? Or what are some that maybe you have found most helpful?
No, I know a lot of people don't like to talk about the pandemic. It's kind of our collective trauma that nobody wants to talk about yet. But a big thing that was impacted for a lot of people were daily living activities, right? Our schedule, our consistency, how much or how little we were sleeping, eating, going out, having our supports. So even if we can look at our day-to-day schedule, whether or not it's consistent, if it's inconsistent, how we're feeling on a day-to-day basis, that can usually be a good starting point to sort of gauge either small term changes that we might want to start to implement or things that are maybe bigger scale. Even if it's like less screen time or taking 5-minute breaks, sometimes there can be that temptation like, oh, I'm so busy at work, I don't have time for a 30-minute break. I'm just gonna work through lunch, or I'm not gonna do anything. Take a 5-minute break. Like there's nothing wrong with having small breaks that can sort of build and have the same effect as a longer term break. So again, sort of similar with the first question, starting somewhere and just being able to facilitate those small changes so that we can see the effort in ourselves and know that we're doing something that can make a difference long term can be huge.
Mhm. I totally agree with that, Tyler. And I think one thing that I really like to get people started in a small actionable step for their mental health, it really depends on what you're trying to do with your mental health for sure. But generally, I know that there are plenty of folks listening who make their to-do lists every day and maybe make a short guide for themselves for the week or for the day as to what they want to get done. And I can't tell you how many times I have clients who are overwhelmed by their to-do list and they're kind of stacking it and making it super long, and becomes a bit of a brain dump that is overwhelming to tackle. So my first step is to always slash the to-do list in half. And one way to do that is to separate the things that you need to do that meet practical responsibilities for your life, whether that's caring for a pet or for a family member or for yourself, right? Like I have to brush my teeth and, eat something today, make my way to the office, et cetera, versus the things that you have to be. So have a to-do list and the to-be list. And the to-do list fulfills the practical responsibilities of your life. The to-be list brings you closer to a sense of wholeness and a sense of like purposefulness, right? It's almost like turning up the saturation on what makes you you. And I love teaching clients about the to-be list because it's a concrete way to make that list a little smaller. They're like, oh, actually, all these things that I thought I had to do were just ways that I needed to reframe what I already had within me to be myself. And the question I usually will ask is, if your to-do list is super long, is there anything on that list that if you didn't get it done today would change who you are as a person? And if the answer is no, then take it off the list. It's not something that you need to do. If it's not a practical responsibility, like I've got to take the dog to the vet, or I've got to go pick up the kid from daycare, or I need to finish this email because I have a project that's due tomorrow. If it's something that you're really trying to do, like I need to write this email because then I'm going to be someone who my boss really thinks is on top of it, and then I'm going to really get the pathway to the promotion that I'm supposed to be, like, take a step back and ask yourself if that is a true to-do item, or if that's something that you're trying to be, that you're kind of masking something on your to-do list to make something happen. And I think that frustration between wanting to be something and having your to-do list fall on the total responsibility of fulfilling your wholeness as a person can be really tense for clients. And it's so difficult when you're just thinking about, well, what can I do first, right? First things first, let's simplify. Let's kind of separate some of the things that are most important, create a priority, and then maybe do a little bit of exploration on later when you have a moment, when you have some time to really think. what is it that I'm trying to do and who am I trying to be and what things on this list contribute to each of them.
Thank you. I know there was a question in the chat, Megan. Can you repeat the to be again, how you define that?
Yeah, like a to-do list meets a practical responsibility, but
Mhm.
your to-be list is something that grounds you back into a sense of who you are as a person. So for example, for me, something on my to-do list, I have a toddler, I have to pick him up from daycare. That is on my to-do list. I've got to do the bath, I've got to do the bedtime, I've got to get the schedule coordinated, got to figure that out for my son. To be list, right? Like, I want to be a great mom. I want to be a present partner. I want to be all of these things. And sometimes there's all this pressure on my to-do list that really my sense of who I need to be is riding on. And that can be a bit of a conflict for folks who put a lot of pressure on themselves to make transformational changes and to make it happen on an everyday basis all the time. So a to-be list for me is I want to be more present. I want to be more mindful. I want to be more connected to my partner, to my son. So the to-be list might then be like, okay, well, I'm going to be more compassionate. Even if I'm a little bit late to the pickup, I'm going to show up with a little bit less phone in my hand and worrying about like whether or not I'm doing everything right for the schedule, and just try to color for the activity with my son. He's really into coloring. And so sometimes there will be things that you do that will meet a sense of fulfillment to be who you are. And then there are some things that you need to be that will ultimately fall into a practical responsibility. It's not a matter of like fully, truly partitioning out and creating a complete separation and getting super specific about, well, what is my to-be list and what is my to-do list? It's really just a mental reframe to kind of separate for yourself personally. What do I want to do? And what are the actual tasks of my everyday? And can I meet that? And how am I maybe conflating or kind of making more relevant than needs to be the stuff I want to be, who I need to be, how whole I am as a person, how fulfilled and how satisfied I am as a person, and how am I placing that on my to-do list? And maybe can we release some of that pressure for ourselves? That's kind of an example.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much. And I think a lot of people in the chat are resonating with that. And it's a helpful framing for them. I know that that kind of gives everyone some ideas of, okay, what are these small things we can do? How can we break down the bigger changes that we want to see in ourselves? But sometimes I think identifying that first step can be especially hard, especially for those of us that are living with mental health conditions. So you overthink, there's a lot of thoughts going on. You want to make the change, you know the things to do, but what is that first step? That can seem overwhelming. How would you suggest someone identify kind of that first small step?
I think that it's sometimes feels very instinctive to just reach for the habit that feels like it has like a one-to-one relationship with the habit that you're trying to build. But sometimes I feel like a smaller step and a first step to take is to change something in your life that can create space for the change that you want to make. And so, coming off of like the working out example again, when we want to make this big change, the idea is, okay, I have to work out, and that's how the change happens. But let's think about all of the ways that you can actually support yourself in showing up to the workout session. So does that mean, setting up breakfast the night before so you're not, struggling in the morning and you're like, I don't even have time for breakfast, I can't work out right now, right? Or setting up your clothes out already. It sounds like it's not that important, but the less friction you have in changing the habit, the more likely you are to make that habit. So you can also like just kind of analyze everything around that habit change to make something small. Again, that has a domino effect. Or you can create like an after reward system, right? So, okay, if I work out at this time, then I'm gonna do X thing that I really want. Like maybe it's like watching your show, right? The show that you're watching. So kind of creating this like reward system can also be really helpful in just getting that first step done. And when it comes to identifying, another thing that's really, really helpful is try to see what already fits in your life. It's very disappointing when you're trying to build a new habit that just doesn't fit the rest of your life at all. So if your shopping habits are such that, you know, let's say you're buying things that you really know that are not that healthy for you, what is the rest of your life like that can make it easier for you to purchase things that are healthy, right? Or change your snacking habit, so that you have healthier snacks available to you. So it's like kind of thinking through your whole life. I like to say that your like make the new change your personality. And in that this is more like internet speak. Like I'm not saying you have to become the person who only talks about running. You know what they say, like people who CrossFit will always tell you they're CrossFit. But just, you know, it's a tongue-in-cheek way of saying that, you know, make that habit your personality so that it's so easy to integrate it into your life. So just kind of think about that.
For sure. And I like the idea of just sort of giving yourself grace as well, too. Like nothing is permanent. So even if we have that great sort of template or starting point and we don't like it, there's nothing wrong with changing it, right? Like, especially sort of in American culture, there can be this ideal of, oh no, you got to find the perfect thing, you got to stick with it, and you just got to keep going. That's not the case. It's like that false sense of urgency. Flexibility is so much more important than urgency sometimes, especially if it's that change within ourselves. So just sort of giving ourselves grace, knowing that nothing is set in stone. If we like it, we can add on to it. If it's too much, we can take away from it. It depends on so many different things, and it's all about finding that balance. Like if we have a super stressful job that's currently going on, we might need more supports than we would at other times of our life. If our job is pretty chill, we might need less support. So it's this continuum and spectrum that's always sort of sliding back and forth between the different events that are going on in life, and just being flexible with it. Like roll with the resistance. I know therapists love that phrase, right? But it can be really meaningful, especially in sort of that mentality of finding that first step.
I love this idea of flexibility and not leaning into a manufactured urgency to make a change. And you mentioned something that I just want to pick at, which is like, it's okay to change your mind. Like, it's okay to shift and to make an adjustment. Like, you might start on a path and then feel like, okay, well, I've committed to that path, right? I'm trying to make this change. I'm picking off small steps towards this larger goal. And if you tend to be an all or nothing thinker, like I either do it all this way or like I'm a failure, or you personalize the experience, meaning like if I don't get this done, then I am a failure, I am a bad person, I should be ashamed of myself. We can also apply those concepts to ourselves as we are working through change, and it's helpful to kind of spot that and to remind ourselves, say like, it's actually okay to change my mind. I can shift, I can be flexible. And if I'm uncomfortable with that flexibility, if the process of opening myself up and giving myself grace and being more compassionate feels strange to hear, I know, Isra, you probably talk a lot about this in your book. It's totally also very much okay to be compassionate rather than just speak compassion to yourself, because sometimes that positive self-talk and that motivation to keep going and to pick a small thing doesn't feel realistic or even real. It doesn't feel authentic. And so when you're struggling to navigate, I have these negative self-talk cycles, and it's hard for me to even pick one step. Compassion and grace and flexibility are also personified in actions, as well as the ways you speak to yourself. You can put a small hand on your heart and take a deep breath before you enter into a difficult conversation, and that's an act of compassion, right? That's an act of giving yourself grace. That's slowing down a process. You can really think about healing and making a small step, whether or not you're dealing with depression or you're working through trauma, as rehearsals for larger healing. Like, these small shifts that you make are rehearsals for the life you want to live. And it's about repetition with care, but also letting yourself shift when you need to, and getting that practice to do that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Beautiful words from each of you. And one thing that I'm seeing a lot in the chat is like that struggle for consistency. And we all know it's so hard. And I see people saying like, oh, get on something and be good in routine, and then I fall off again. And it's really challenging, and it's okay. It's natural. It's a part of the process as we're healing and growing and learning. But I know something that our speakers have touched on and that I want to uplift too is that it's choices that you get to make for these steps, and they should feel good for you. So, don't force yourself. And I know we've been talking a lot about physical activity, but it's not that you have to pick up running or CrossFit. Maybe you like to move your body in yoga. Maybe you just like to walk. Those small, if you like stretching throughout the day, those types of things. Again, with other examples other than just working out, maybe you're creative. Maybe you love to paint or draw or write. Maybe writing drives you crazy. Then don't make journaling your first step, So finding those things that you enjoy. If you're struggling, you're noticing I'm not sleeping. I'm staying up too late and I'm watching TV, but that's something that brings me joy. But then I'm tired and I'm exhausted. My mental health is hurting. Maybe let yourself watch one episode of that show you love, and then we turn everything off and go to bed, So it's not these drastic, I'm going to cut everything that's hurting me, or I'm going to start something that I really don't like, but I know is good for me. There's that space in between where it's things that are going to help you. And I think that's where the consistency comes in. And where I've found consistency is if it's things that are causing me more anxiety or are causing me more stress, that are supposed to be helping my mental health, it's easy to let it go. But when you find the things that work for you, it's helpful. But again, not all of healing and mental health help is going to be comfortable. There are going to be moments of discomfort, but finding that right balance where you have things that are bringing joy to your life, and helping your mental health. So I just wanted to uplift that too.
Jackie, before
Yeah.
you move forward, I just wanted to say that was so lovely. I think that's like an important call out to make for sure. The thing that I just wanted to add to that is sometimes it's really hard we can get really hard on ourselves because we want to remove, right? The whole
Mhm.
world is telling you all of those things are negative and bad habits. And like anytime you open Instagram, you're just hit with all of this information, right? I have always found it more helpful for myself and for my clients to help people add on healthier things or fun things or more grounding things, as opposed to first trying to remove, because that suddenly, when you start adding small practices, even if it's like joining a creative hobby or having your morning coffee just on your own, no email, no Instagram, nothing, even if you just add a small positive experience, it gives you a little bit more emotional resilience to remove the thing that you really no longer want in your life that's causing you some distress.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Israel. I want to kind of pivot our conversation a little bit to a certain topic. And if you read the webinar description, you knew we were going to chat about this, which is this idea of radical acceptance. And it's a tool that can be used. But I want to hear from our speakers first, just to help define it with our audience. What is radical acceptance, and how can people use it to try to work towards improving their well-being on a daily basis?
It's
Yeah.
interesting because when I saw that this was our subject, I was like, oh yeah, I know what that is. I don't use it that often, but I know what it is. And then I was like thinking about it. It was like, no, I use this all the time with the majority of my clients, especially in the military context, because a big point of focus can often be stress from PCSing, so permanent change of station, moving to a totally new area, checking into a command, moving your family, essentially starting over. And a lot of work with clients on that piece is like the validation and identifying what we do have control over in that situation versus what we don't have control over in that situation, right? And I say this as a military spouse, like when the Navy tells us we're moving somewhere, I can get upset about it, but we're still going to have to move there. I didn't want to move to Florida for 3 years, but I did anyway. So it's one of those things, and I could have gotten very upset about it, and I definitely could have done better about that, but it wasn't something that I had any control over. And sometimes it's hard, especially when it's in a not ideal situation, to accept that and try to make the best of it. And even when we do our best in that situation, once we're out of that, it might not be our best in a better situation. So I know, like when I was in Florida and not happy about it, would I have done things differently? Absolutely. So it's that matter of sort of accepting it, embracing it, and really pinpointing what we do have control over versus what we don't have control over. And sometimes as a clinician, it can be frustrating because it's a lot of validation, and sometimes there's not too much action that you can take. Like when I saw civilians in private practice or community-based services, if a presenting concern was, oh yeah, I don't like my job, it's like, okay, well, can you talk to a career counselor? Can you start applying for different job applications or this or that? That's not an option in the military. So it depends on your audience and population, sort of that specific definition of radical acceptance as well too.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That definitely sounds frustrating because so much of life can feel like it's out of control. But I think that's the piece that is so important when it comes to radical acceptance is we're scanning the situation to find the pieces of control, not the things that we would wish that we had control over. You know, when it comes to radical acceptance, I think one of the most common misunderstanding of the concept is that radical acceptance means approval. So someone is harming me, something terrible is happening, you know, something is occurring that is causing distress. In order for me to radically accept it, I must approve that this is happening. And that can be like a really disempowering place. So we don't want to confuse those things. Radical acceptance does not mean that you're saying whatever's happening is okay, right? You can rationalize and find the justifications, but it just means that you have to stop fighting the thing that's happening and instead, you know, kind of redirect your energy into recognizing the pieces you can reclaim some agency, recognizing the pieces that you can bring some change or influence. Radical acceptance sometimes can also be very quickly confused with toxic positivity, right? So it's like bypassing difficult emotions. Oh, I'm feeling bad. I just have to accept it. In order for me to feel healed, I have to just accept it. That's radical acceptance. No, it's the piece Tyler talked about. It's about acknowledging this is occurring, validating that it's okay for me to feel this way, and then finding pieces of influence and control. You know, and sometimes the piece that we control or influence is not directly the thing that causes us distress. So just jumping off of your example, Tyler, around redeployment, which is obviously so distressing for multiple reasons. As a therapist, you might encourage the client to find pockets of joy in their life where they must live, because that's a decision that's been made by someone else, right? So maybe finding ways in your schedule to engage in a creative hobby, maybe finding ways to join community that's present there. So those type of pieces can fill your self-care bucket, even if you're in a circumstance that doesn't feel like you have a lot of agency. And that's the action piece. That's the empowered piece of radical acceptance.
No, I love what everyone is saying. And I think the way that I think about it is that it's meeting reality without resistance, right? It isn't this approval or even giving up or having compassion for and desiring something to happen. Acceptance is just creating space to choose your next move consciously with a little bit of distance created between the why is this happening to me and what do I know about the situation today. In DBT, the way that they describe radical acceptance really comes from Zen Buddhism, this idea that life is painful, but suffering is optional. And it's a very tough concept to hold in like the Eastern tradition, but it's one that when you've cultivated this idea that I will face challenges in my life, I will face things that I don't know how to accept, I will face the challenges of my everyday and maybe even larger systemic, structural, institutional things that I can't change or challenge. But the suffering of my day-to-day depends on the ways that I apply my consciousness to creating space for acknowledgement, right? Like, this is what's here. Now, what do I need? What does that mean for me at that next step? And I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier around choosing a small step forward, right? Like, what does the next 30 seconds offer me if I am acknowledging what's here? And then if I acknowledge what's here and there's a need, can I meet that need? Is there anything getting in between me and that need? Is it challenging with a why? So like, well, why is it like this? Why is it like this? You know, why does it have to be this way? And that is I think the way that DBT describes it as fighting reality as opposed to meeting reality and creating space for that next step.
And just because we have to accept something doesn't mean that we can't advocate for ourselves or the situation that we're in or the groups of people that we're around, because it's very easy to skew it based on what we want that final message to be. And sometimes I don't want to jump ahead because I know we'll get to that, but just getting in that practice of advocating for ourselves, our spouse, our job, our community, that can be a big piece as well too. And they're not mutually exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Tyler, for that reminder. And Megan and Isra, I loved what you said, Megan, of meeting reality without resistance. It's such a great way to define that. I think Isra started to touch on this a little bit. When we talk about that shift of radical acceptance versus we're getting into that space of maybe toxic positivity, like Tyler mentioned, of just accepting and this is the way it's going to be without any, further advocacy or action afterwards. There's different ways that radical acceptance can be misunderstood maybe or misused. So I know we started to touch on it, but I'd love to hear from each of you just on some advice for those that are listening. If this is something that they want to start building into their outlook and practice, how can we make sure we're using it in a healthy way and avoiding kind of crossing over into maybe some of those toxic patterns?
No, that's a great question. And sort of I was jumping ahead a bit before because it's very easy to focus on the toxicity or maybe view a situation as being permanent and being like, well, this is it. This is my fate. I'm doomed. I'm stuck here. There's nothing I can do. And that's a cognitive distortion, right? Like that's the emotional side of our brain taking over because we're in a stressful situation. Sometimes we just have to pause, breathe, take a step back, pull in the logic of the situation, even if it is within the realm of radical acceptance, and be like, no, I might have to accept aspects of this situation, but I don't have to accept all of it, or there are pieces that I still do have control over or can advocate myself for. And sometimes, like, sort of expanding to the scope of like social media and internet, we have access to everything possible 24/7, right? Just because we have access to it doesn't mean that we need to use it. Right? And in social justice in any capacity, it can have a trickle down effect. Just because we don't make huge systemic change doesn't mean that we can't make individual change within ourselves. Or even if we're just making individual change, somebody else could see that and it could have that positive snowball effect. So it has multifacets to it, and sort of looking at it through a bigger lens of, okay, even if we are radically accepting something, what are the nuances associated with it?
Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
I think that's like it's like it's so nuanced, right? To even stop and pause and be like, where is this coming from? And to that, I would say, I think we all, myself included, need to constantly build the practice of pausing before responding to something, even if it's our own thoughts. You know, a lot of times we have these thoughts like, oh yeah, this is never going to change, or this will never happen for me. I'll never get that job. We don't pause, take two deep breaths to question that thought, to see if it's based in fact or if it's reality, or, you know, is it true? So I think that's like a practice we all have to build when it comes to identifying radical acceptance from other unhealthy mindset shifts, right? And the thing that I kind of feel is like a good, what is it, canary in a coal mine, I think is the phrase, or just like red flag, is like, what is the intention behind your radical acceptance? Are you just accepting it because you feel empowered? Because you're like, I'm going to search for the place where I can have some agency? Or are you accepting it because you feel like you're disempowered, like you've given up? Like it's, so where's that intention coming from? I think that's a really good sign for somebody to delineate where their thought is coming from. And the second is, are you using it to avoid something? If you are using this concept of radical acceptance to avoid a difficult conversation with a friend, right? To not set a boundary because you're like, oh, this is just who they are. I just have to radically accept this person for who they are. I think like that is like a really important way of distinguishing how the concept is showing up for you and how you can kind of shift gears to get into a little bit more of a healthier mindset.
I love that. And I think in the same way that when someone's grieving, we don't want to force their grief into gratitude, right? We don't want to reframe it to say like, you should just be grateful. When someone's really feeling an emotion, we don't want to bypass authentic feelings and avoid them in order to meet some sort of larger goal of I've just accepted it, right? Like if the purpose of acceptance isn't owned by you, if you don't feel a sense of ownership behind the decision to accept something, you feel like you're being forced or you're being pressured, whether that is pressure from your own self-talk or external from others, right? Narratives that you've digested and consumed, or barriers in your life, it's important to really do take that pause. I love that, to just think like, is this mine? Is this my decision? Is this mine? The hardest part as a therapist when clients are struggling with accepting is the feeling of circularity that happens, right? Like there's a sense of wanting everything to be very linear. So I have accepted it, and so therefore there's no way that I can no longer stop accepting it and then be like resisting it. And fun fact, well, it's not really a fun fact, it's a kind of a sad fact, is that it's circular, right? Like we can be at a place of acceptance and feel good about something, and then something in our life can shift very minimally or slightly, and then we can go back to fighting and resisting and wondering why. And if we have these expectations that somehow once we get to a place of acceptance that there's no going back, that we can't actually also still struggle with it, that they're not other coping skills that need to be layered on top, right? We're talking about boundary setting, we're talking about assertiveness skills, we're talking about honoring and pausing and mindfulness, right? Like there's wisdom in all of these skills as like a layered impact. So when when you want to be linear, you can't imagine that every single skill that you're trying to grow and nurture is going to be at the same level, at the same pace. So radical acceptance really offers not just the relief that we don't have to achieve a standard of acceptance and then somehow bounce off of that into the way that my mind is thinking. It's like, yes, now I have like reached peak awareness. I've gotten it. I'm aware, I'm mindful, and I have accepted. Good for me. The minute we get there is kind of like the minute we don't know what we don't know, right? Like we might find ourselves resisting other things. So to give yourself a little bit of space to go back and forth and to not hold that against yourself as a place of failure, or lack of progress. You're still moving, but moving forward doesn't necessarily mean that you're not growing.
And I love your parallel to grief, because grief is such an individualized process, and so is acceptance, right? Even radical acceptance. What it looks like for me might be different from you, might be similar to you, different. It's a huge spectrum, right? And grief, like, it's a very human process and it's a very normal process. There are stages to grief, but it doesn't mean that we have to like start at 1, end at 10, and then you're done. Like we pinball, we bounce around. It's the same with radical acceptance. And it's not, like you said, linear. Like we might be going in a general upward trajectory, or it could be positive growth, but you zoom in and it's like an EKG. It's got its ups and its downs, and just because we hit it down, sometimes there's that temptation of like, oh, I gotta throw all this crap out the window, I'm awful. No, it's just an opportunity to go back up.
Mm-hmm. It's a constant hill of acceptance.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your insights there. I know this hour has flown by and we can keep talking forever and ever today. And it's just gone by too quick, but we have just a little bit of time before I'll close this out. I want to finish with one kind of final question for you all. I know we've had a lot of people in the chat sharing your experiences, maybe things that are going on with you personally, ways you might be struggling or needing support. For each of you, if there are people on the call today who are kind of feeling that struggle with their own mental health, what's the one thing that you want them to leave this conversation with today knowing?
I'll start this one because I think like, yes, people in the chat are sharing this. I'm sure all of us on this panel also have it. I think the most important thing to remember is a two-part. One is everyone struggles, but a struggle doesn't mean that you're not good enough. Like, that is the most important thing. Any struggle in any domain of your life does not mean that you're not good enough. It just means that you have to try different ways of making yourself feel better. It's just about creativity and diversity of the way you show up for yourself. The second thing I'd say is, if you are someone who's struggling, this kind of goes back into like the first question, which is, we talked about how do people support themselves? I think it was a question around self-care. And I wanted to bring it up then. But if there is a way that you can keep a standing social connection in your regular routine. So get in the habit of calling people in when you feel like isolating, getting the habit of reaching out when you feel like just throwing your phone away. And, I think it's called bed rotting, right? Like, and we've all done it. But I would say that doing the calculation of organizing meetups is very taxing on the mind, especially if you are not in the best like mood. So I really encourage people to have a weekly 20-minute check-in with a friend, or like a combined hang. Like, if you know that you go grocery shopping on Thursdays, invite a friend, do it together. Maybe you shift your day to Wednesdays because they go on Wednesdays. Maybe have a standing walk with someone in the neighborhood. Just something that is like a regular occurrence in your day-to-day that requires some social connection with somebody you like and feel safe with, that has just a profound effect on our wellness. They might not be able to make you feel better, but you're not going to feel lonely. Struggle feels harder when we struggle with loneliness as well. So I think that's like my biggest piece. And this is something I really integrated in my life as well. The second half of last year, just weaving in social interactions.
Totally. I think if there's a takeaway that I would add for folks is that you can't shame yourself into healing, growth, and transformation. And you can't also force yourself into just thinking that everything is going to be okay. And there's never any sort of like challenge that you might face. It's a lot more difficult to find the messy middle of there are some amazing things that are happening and there are some awful things that are happening. And there are things I can control and there are things that I can't. But in all of my years of practice, I have never met a single person that has bullied themselves into powerful change. I have never met a single person that has made a major transformation by being delusional about how amazing everything is and just forgetting and suppressing that they have feelings, even if those feelings don't feel very good or don't look very positive. It's important to acknowledge that there's not a it's not a binary when it comes to growth. And so to give yourself the opportunity to take a small step and to see that as a sacred ritual, as an opportunity to offer yourself compassion, to add fuel to the tank, to keep going more and more into where you want to be. The world is, in short form, tough to navigate right now. I'm trying to find the words to explain the complexity of a geopolitical global crisis that happens every 6 seconds. And as a therapist, I myself struggle with not being able to find a solution and an answer when I am compelled often to give them. And my best tip is to remember that you can't shame yourself into this and you can't force the positivity to exist where it doesn't. It's also okay to just acknowledge to be right where you are, and know that you have always been enough. You've always been a whole person, and maybe you're just starting to remember and become and challenge yourself to see that in the small steps, in the small rituals, in the small moments.
No, I couldn't agree more with both of you. And sometimes, especially when we are struggling with mental health or anything within the realm of radical acceptance, we can get in that mindset of, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to get better. And nobody deserves those things. It's a human right. And I think that would be a big takeaway for me, at least, is like feeling better, being happy is a human right. And sometimes like that's hard to remember, right? And just because we're therapists doesn't mean that we don't also struggle with that sometimes, right? Like therapists are people too. Everybody, like a lot of what we're talking about, these are universal challenges, universal struggles, and sometimes we just have to remember that, like being human sucks sometimes, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that there isn't opportunity to facilitate that positive change, to make positive change. We, at the risk of sounding like a preschool teacher, and I was a preschool teacher, be kind, right? We never know what snowball effect that can have and how it can impact ourselves, those around us, just our community. It's something very simple, but sometimes overlooked.
Thank you all so much for those beautiful closing words. Just wonderful advice. I want to give each of you, Tyler, Megan, Isra, a huge extended thank you from Mental Health America for joining us, for kicking off our first Mental Health Month webinar in such an incredible way. I want to thank all of you for joining, for your thoughtfulness in the chat, for sharing with us, for being here, for participating. Thank you so much. And a final thank you to Ensora Health, our sponsor today, that helped make this session possible and help us kick off Mental Health Month with these conversations that are really raw and honest and open, and where we can just talk about our mental health, be honest with ourselves, and start to find those ways that we can take action for ourselves, how we can help promote that in the people around us. It's been so wonderful to share this space. So thank you, panelists. I know a lot of people were asking, is it being recorded? Will it be sent to me? Yes, of course. I know you're all wanting to share this out afterwards, and please do. So within the week, you'll be emailed with the link to the recording, link to request your certificate of attendance, and all of those other great links from Insora and MHA, and information from each of our speakers on what they have going on that you can access afterwards. So keep an eye out. That'll be coming by the end of the week. But thank you all for being here. Happy Mental Health Month. We encourage you to take that action for yourself this month and beyond. You did the first step. You came here, you listened today, you learned some things that you'll be able to take with you. So thank you all for joining, and huge thank you to our panelists.
Thank you, Jackie.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We will now be closing out, and keep an eye out for more information to come from us. Thank you, Isra, Megan, and Tyler.
Thank you so much.
Bye.